You're listening to the Relationships Uncomplicated podcast. Relationship advice so valuable, you won't believe it's free. And now your host, relationship expert, Idit Sharoni.
I'm Idit Sharoni, licensed marriage and family therapist, affair recovery expert, and the host of Relationships Uncomplicated podcast. I've spent the past decade helping hundreds of couples heal after infidelity. Not just survive it, but rebuild relationships stronger than ever. I turned my private practice into a high-impact recovery program that's guided people around the world through the hardest chapter of their lives. Here, we don't sugarcoat the healing process, but we do believe it's possible. In every episode of Relationships Uncomplicated podcast, I use my clinical experience or team up with one of our clinicians at Relationship Experts to bring you real guidance for real healing. We don't just talk about what's going wrong. We give you clear, actionable steps you can start using today. This isn't just about surviving betrayal. It's about growing stronger together. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back to Relationships Uncomplicated. You're listening to episode 86, and I'm your host, Idit Sharoni. Today, we're diving into a big one, sex addiction, or what's often called sex addiction. Now, I'm going to share some truths about this popular diagnosis, what it is, what it isn't, and why it's become such a go-to explanation for sexual betrayal. But more importantly, I want to help you feel like you have some control again, especially if you're dealing with something that may have gotten the wrong name, and because of that, maybe even the wrong treatment. So the real question we're asking today is it sex addiction? If you've just discovered infidelity or you're living in the thick of its aftermath, this question might have already crossed your mind. If you're the hurt partner, you might be wondering, are they addicted to sex? And if you are the betraying partner, you might have asked yourself, am I a sex addict? Is that why I did this? It's a question that comes up again and again with the couples I work with, and I get it. The betrayal feels so extreme, so confusing, and so painful that calling it sex addiction can feel like a way to make sense of all of it. A way to give the chaos a label. But here's the thing. Slapping a label on something doesn't always help you heal. Sometimes it actually helps you get stuck, especially if the label isn't accurate. Here's what I want you to know. You're not alone in asking that question, and I promise to walk you through it with care, with research, and with some very, very clear next steps. I'll also share with you the model I use in my own work, the out-of-control sexual behavior, OCSB model, and why I find it so powerful and healing, especially for couples in the aftermath of betrayal. This conversation is going to be all about getting informed, so you can make decisions that are based on insight and not on fear or shame. And I'll say this up front. Just because something feels out of control doesn't always mean it's an addiction. All right, we're going to get into all of that and more right after this message. This episode is sponsored by my Infidelity Recovery and Healing Program, It's Okay to Stay. If you're struggling in the aftermath of infidelity but want to stay together, you can rebuild trust and heal through genuine expert help from me and my team personally. I started It's Okay to Stay after seeing couples therapy and self-help options often lacked essential components to help couples save their relationship after infidelity. It's Okay to Stay is a complete 8-week coaching program that involves an online roadmap course and one-on-one work with an affair recovery specialist. So if you have faith in your relationship and you want to stay together and heal, let's talk. I'm offering a 45-minute free consultation for couples who want to save their relationship and need expert help. If that's you, just go online to iditsharoni.com/45 and pick a time for a video call that both you and your partner can commit to. I'll hop on. We're first going to start with understanding your struggle, and then we're going to walk through It's Okay to Stay to see if the program is right for you. Look, so many couples try therapy and self-help methods only to be put at odds with each other. But that doesn't have to be you. With expert help, It's Okay to Stay will give you the clarity that you need to understand each other, to heal, and to find a path forward past infidelity. So again, all you have to do to book your free consultation is to go to iditsharoni.com/45. That's iditsharoni.com/45. I'll be honored to stand alongside with you on this journey. Welcome back. Now that we've set the stage, let's dig into what the research actually says about sex addiction and why there's so much confusion around this label, especially in relationships that are impacted by infidelity. So let's get into what the clinical world says about this. Bear with me. The DSM-5, which is the main diagnostic manual for mental health disorders in the US, does not include sex addiction as a diagnosis. At one point, it considered something called hypersexual disorder, but it didn't make the cut, largely because there just wasn't enough statistical research to support it. In other words, it couldn't be reliably defined or diagnosed. Now, to be fair, the World Health Organization's ICD-11 does recognize something called compulsive sexual behavior disorder, CSBD. That's a mouthful, but the idea is some people engage in repetitive sexual behavior that feels hard to control, and it causes them distress or consequences in their own lives. So yes, there is recognition that out-of-control sexual behavior exists, but here's where it gets important. The term sex addiction is not recognized as a mental health disorder in the DSM-5, and there are some very specific reasons for that. And I think it's really important that I break it down for you. So one reason, like I mentioned before, is just insufficient research. So for something to be included, or for diagnosis to be included in the DSM, a diagnosis needs strong, consistent research behind it. And while there has been research on compulsive sexual behavior, it hasn't reached the level needed to define it as a standalone disorder. There's just not enough consistent empirical evidence. So that's one reason. Another reason is lack of clear criteria. Even among experts, there is disagreement about how to define compulsive sexual behavior. And when it crosses the line into being problematic, there's no clear agreement on what the diagnostic criteria should even be. And so that's going to cause a situation where it's just not going to be included as a diagnosis. Another reason is risk of pathologizing healthy sexuality. And I find this one really interesting and important, and I really want you to understand. So with thinking about sex addiction as a diagnosis, there is a concern that diagnosing sex addiction could label normal sexual urges as unhealthy, and then as a result, stigmatize people who simply have a high sex drive or who express their sexuality differently. And another reason is it doesn't match substance addiction. So the behavior doesn't show the same patterns we see with substance addiction, like withdrawal symptoms, tolerance, or physical dependency. So instead of labeling someone as sex addicts, therapists might consider diagnoses like impulse control disorder or behavioral addictions, depending on the situation. But even those are approached carefully, and in many cases, the preferred route is a sexual health-focused model rather than a pathologizing one, and I'll talk about it more later. Why pathologizing can be harmful. So sometimes pathologizing, just labeling someone with a certain disorder, is actually helpful. You know what you have, you know the problem you have. If you've been really sad lately, you're not able to get out of bed, you're not able to enjoy things, then sometimes it's helpful to get a diagnosis of clinical depression if it has been persistent and get the correct treatment. With sex addiction, the pathologizing can be harmful because when we immediately label that behavior as addiction, we risk a few things. We turn sexuality into a disease, which creates even more shame, especially in people who already feel broken. We increase shame, which shuts people down often, instead of opening them up to real growth. We might miss the emotional roots of the behavior. So this is another problem with diagnosing, with pathologizing, because we may miss the actual root of the behavior and just look at the results of the behavior, like trauma, loneliness, avoidance, or anxiety, which all of them can be the root of the behavior. Okay? We might shift the focus away from responsibility, and that can make it harder for partners to rebuild trust. And we might end up with the wrong kind of treatment, which to me is really tricky. Like the main treatment for sex addiction is abstinence. Abstinence is focused on really just not doing the behavior. And so abstinence-focused programs don't support long-term relational healing and encourage avoidance of normal life situations. For example, we've worked with multiple unfaithful partners who were labeled as sex addicts and even took a program or were part of therapy sessions where what they needed to do is first stop the behavior and then never do that behavior again. And so many times they found themselves unable to be in normal, regular day situations, like one couple who went on a flight and the unfaithful partner who was labeled as a sex addict was asked to put blinders to not see the videos, because in the videos in front of them there was a woman with a spaghetti strap tank top. And this is just one example out of many. And so when you ask people to engage in abstinence, sex is one of those things that is very hard to not do or to not have, because part of it is the actual behavior, like watching porn, but part of it is also avoiding a lot of situations that might trigger it, and which are very, very difficult to avoid in real life. I would say that a lot of addiction-focused treatment models are built around abstinence. No sex, no porn, no masturbation, and that may be necessary in some extreme cases, I'm not saying. But for many people, especially in committed relationships, abstinence does not promote healing. It promotes avoidance. Now, let's talk about why stopping the behavior isn't enough. Let me break something down that I see all the time, especially in couples trying to heal after infidelity. If you're in a relationship and you're trying to repair trust after betrayal, focusing only on stopping the sexual behavior without really digging into why it happened in the first place can leave you stuck in the same loop. Here's what I mean. Let's say someone has been using porn excessively or engaging in paid sex, and they're quickly labeled a sex addict or a porn addict. The traditional treatment response is you need to stop watching porn, you need to stop masturbating to it. But if we stop the behavior without exploring the function it served in that person's life, then we're just removing the symptom, not healing the root issue. What we've found again and again in our work with unfaithful partners who have exhibited what we call consensual out-of-control sexual behavior is this. Their behavior wasn't just random or impulsive. It was regulated by emotion. Most of them admitted to turning to sexual behavior like porn use or paid sex when they were feeling overwhelmed, anxious, stressed out, or emotionally disconnected. And for many, that sexual behavior provided immediate relief. It was a fast, private way to escape the discomfort. Now, here's the issue. If we go straight to abstinence without doing any of the deeper work, we've taken away their coping strategy. But we haven't replaced it with anything healthier. So what happens? They're still stressed, still anxious. And at some point, they go right back to the only tool they know, the sexual behavior. This is why ignoring the emotional function of out-of-control sexual behavior leaves the person vulnerable. Because if the original behavior served as a way to cope, even if it was damaging, it's going to keep coming back unless we give them a new, values-aligned, and emotionally supportive way to regulate. That's the difference between short-term control and long-term control, or long-term healing, I would say. Now, this is something that I found to be really interesting. It's an article from a psychiatrist who helped write the DSM. Now, I want to share something that really highlights, and this is this article. What he says really highlights what I've been talking about, and it comes from this psychiatrist who was actually the chair of the task force that wrote the DSM-5. And I'll link to the specific HuffPost article in the show notes. So Dr. Alan Francis, a professor at Duke, I think he's emeritus professor now, he wrote a book called Saving Normal, but I specifically want to discuss one of his ideas in an article called Do We All Have Behavioral Addictions? And his message is pretty powerful. He warns against the trend of medicalizing normal human behavior and turning everyday passions or impulses into mental health diagnosis. He's especially critical of the idea of labeling behaviors like sex, shopping, gaming, or internet use as behavioral addictions without any strong evidence or even clear diagnostic criteria. And here is what he says. Repetitive pleasure seeking is a ubiquitous part of human nature. While compulsive behavior that is not rewarding is relatively rare, but on the surface, it's extremely difficult to tell the two apart. That's exactly the problem. When someone repeatedly engages in a behavior like watching porn or seeking sexual stimulation, especially when it's tied to stress or emotional overwhelm, it might look like an addiction, but it could actually be their brain's way of coping. And if we're too quick to label it as psychiatric illness, we risk doing two things: missing the real emotional driver behind the behavior and giving someone a medical excuse that removes personal accountability. Francis even jokes about his own so-called behavioral addictions, like excessive reading and loving his wife, which makes an important point. Not every intense or even disruptive passion is a disorder. So why am I telling you this? Because if you or your partner are trying to make sense out of control sexual behavior after infidelity, it's so important to explore what that behavior meant in context, not just try to stop it or label it as an addiction. Dr. Francis' article reinforces what many of us in the sexual health field believe, that we need to treat people as whole, as complex human beings, not just a list of symptoms. So with all that in mind, from the research gaps to the concerns about over-pathologizing and even Dr. Francis' cautionary take, it's clear that we need a different, more thoughtful way to understand out-of-control sexual behavior. Maybe one that doesn't jump straight to addiction, one that makes space for accountability and emotional nuance, one that doesn't shame sexuality but helps people realign with their values. That's exactly where the out-of-control sexual behavior model, the OCSB, comes in. And it's the framework I personally use when working with couples in the aftermath of infidelity. Let me walk you through what it is, why it works, and how it offers a healthier, more effective path forward for people trying to make real change. So now that we've explored what isn't always helpful, like rushing to label something as sex addiction or focusing only on stopping the behavior, let's talk about what is helpful. This is where the out-of-control sexual behavior model, or OCSB, comes in. This model was developed by Doug Brown Harvey, a therapist and a sexual health expert, and it offers something I think is deeply needed in this conversation: a way to understand problematic sexual behavior that's rooted in sexual health, not shame. So instead of asking, "Am I addicted to sex?" we ask, "Is this behavior consistent with my values? Is it aligned with the agreements I've made in my relationship? And am I using this behavior to avoid emotions I don't know how to deal with?" The OCSB model doesn't try to diagnose you. It doesn't label people at all. And it doesn't demand that you shut down your sexuality. Instead, it helps you understand the function of your behavior. It helps you explore how it developed over time and learn how to regulate your emotions in a healthier, more value-aligned ways. And this is so important for couples healing after infidelity, because the goal isn't just stopping the behavior, the goal is healing the rupture. Understanding what creates the disconnect in the first place and building something new based on honesty, trust, and mutual respect. That's what OCSB makes possible. It's not about assigning blame, it's about creating change with compassion, insight, and with a path forward that actually works. So we've talked about why the label sex addiction might not always be helpful. And we've explored a healthier, more compassionate model, OCSB, that gives people agency and supports true healing. But I know what you might be wondering about. What do we actually do with all of this? If you or your partner are facing out of control sexual behavior, whether it's excessive porn use, secretive behavior, or something that's simply out of alignment with your values, what does healing look like? Let's walk through some actionable, real-world steps that you can take, whether you're the one who acted outside the relationship, the one who was hurt, or both of you trying to figure out the way forward together. All the steps are going to be right after this message. This episode is sponsored by my Infidelity Recovery and Healing Program, It's Okay to Stay. If you're struggling in the aftermath of infidelity but want to stay together, you can rebuild trust and heal through genuine expert help from me and my team personally. I started It's Okay to Stay after seeing couples therapy and self-help options often lacked essential components to help couples save their relationship after infidelity. It's Okay to Stay is a complete 8-week coaching program that involves an online roadmap course and one-on-one work with an affair recovery specialist. So if you have faith in your relationship and you want to stay together and heal, let's talk. I'm offering a 45-minute free consultation for couples who want to save their relationship and need expert help. If that's you, just go online to iditsharoni.com/45 and pick a time for a video call that both you and your partner can commit to. I'll hop on. We're first going to start with understanding your struggle, and then we're going to walk through It's Okay to Stay to see if the program is right for you. Look, so many couples try therapy and self-help methods only to be put at odds with each other. But that doesn't have to be you. With expert help, It's Okay to Stay will give you the clarity that you need to understand each other, to heal, and to find a path forward past infidelity. So again, all you have to do to book your free consultation is to go to iditsharoni.com/45. That's iditsharoni.com/45. I'll be honored to stand alongside with you on this journey. Welcome back. So if you're in a relationship that's been impacted by infidelity and you suspect out of control sexual behavior might be part of the picture, I want to offer you some concrete, compassionate steps that you can take, whether you're the unfaithful partner, the hurt partner, and then I'm going to give you some steps for both of you who are hopefully trying to navigate this together. This isn't about fixing everything overnight. It's about taking the next right step. The step that's going to move you towards clarity, healing, and choice. So a couple of steps for the unfaithful partners. If you're the unfaithful partner, I would suggest that the first thing you do is reflect on your values. Ask yourself, what kind of partner do I want to be? What does healthy sexuality look like to me? When behavior is out of alignment with your values, that's often where the work begins. So the first thing you want to do is ask yourself, is this part of my values? Does it match my values? And if not, then you already know that your work now begins. Then, what you also want to do is track emotional triggers. So you want to start noticing when you feel the urge to engage in the behavior. What emotion comes up first? Is it anxiety, shame, boredom, anger? This helps you identify patterns so you can replace old coping strategies with healthier ones. This is something we do with our clients. We definitely explore this part with you. We are really good at identifying those patterns. What you also want to do is avoid self-diagnosing. So instead of assuming you have an addiction, ask, what is the out of control sexual behavior doing for me? Instead of just saying, okay, I have sex addiction, I have this problem. Ask yourself, what is this solving for me? What is it doing for me? And then, this is not an easy question to answer sometimes. And so if you need help, seek support from a therapist that is trained in sexual health to explore this further. I would also say you might want to consider practicing full responsibility without shame. Own your choices and the impact they've had on your partner, but do it with compassion for yourself. This isn't about self-punishment. It's about showing up honestly for change. It's about taking responsibility and saying, I am doing this because of this, and I know how it's impacting my partner. Now, a couple of things for the hurt partner. If you're the hurt partner, one of the things I want you to do is get informed, not overwhelmed. Learn about different frameworks like OCSB, so you're not operating off of fear-based assumptions. The more you understand what might be happening, the more empowered you will feel. Also, set boundaries that reflect your needs. Boundaries are not punishments, they're clarity. Be honest about what you need in order to feel safe, respected, and supported moving forward. Next, know that trust can be rebuilt with work. Healing is possible, but it doesn't happen in one apology or one session. It happens in consistent actions, mutual effort, and emotional honesty over time. A couple of suggestions for both partners. One is avoid the addiction trap unless it truly is helpful for you. So some cases, the diagnosis sex addiction is helpful and takes couples in the right direction. If you feel it's helpful to you, use it and treat it as the sex addiction that is labeled. But if it's not helpful, then use the language that encourages healing and not shame. Ask, is this a pattern that feels misleading with who I want to be, rather than, is this a disease? Work with a qualified professional. Look for a therapist who understands the complexity of relationships, especially ones in the aftermath of infidelity, and one that understands the complexity of sexual behavior, not just addiction models. And so sometimes when you either label yourself or you get labeled with sex addiction, then you are sent on your own to a program, to a sex addiction program. That is very much the addiction model, sometimes the 12-step model. And as you probably already understand, it's not that simple. And sometimes it's not helpful. Next, commit to a shared vision. As a couple, you don't have to know exactly where this is going, but agreeing to show up, be curious, and do the work together is a powerful starting point. I know today's episode was a big one. If you're sitting with a mix of relief, confusion, or even more questions, please know that's completely normal. The truth is, when it comes to infidelity and sexual behavior that feels out of control, there aren't always quick answers. But what you do have is choice. You have the ability to explore, to understand, and to decide what kind of healing journey feels right for you. And it's not just a right. I feel it's a duty. You have to find what is right for you and your relationship. So whether the behavior you're facing has been labeled sex addiction or not, what matters most is this. Does it feel misaligned with your values? Has it harmed your relationship? And are you ready to start making intentional changes? If the answer is yes, then you're already on your way and you don't have to do it alone. Inside our It's Okay to Stay Infidelity Recovery Program, we help couples move through this exact process with support, with structure, and of course with compassion. So you can rebuild trust, restore connection, and write a new story together. If that's what you choose, of course. You can learn more at relationshipexpertsonline.com. And if this episode helped you in any way, I'd be happy and very, very grateful if you share it with someone who might need it too. Or you might want to leave a quick review to help others find this support. Until next time, I'm Idit Sharoni, and thank you so much for listening. And as always, take good care of yourself and your relationship. Take care.